some of the numbers suggest that Donald Trump has been more parsimonious with his commutations and pardons than almost any president in the last few. So I thought we'd talk about it with Hans von Spakovsky, who's a senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Hans, welcome back to the program.
Lars, thanks for having me back.
Let's start with a general question, and that is, was the commutation appropriate? Or when it comes to commutations, is there such a thing as an inappropriate commutation of a sentence?
Well, I don't think you can judge whether or not this was inappropriate. It certainly was in the power of the president. And think about this. Roger Stone is a first-time nonviolent offender, and the entire investigation that focused on him got started through false evidence. Remember, the whole Russia collusion investigation was based on lies and falsehoods and
Steele dossier and such.
Yeah, exactly. So, look, I don't minimize that Roger Stone, he was accused of lying to Congress, but he was also accused of trying to tamper with a witness because he supposedly threatened a witness. The witness was a radio talk show host who actually testified in Stone's favor, saying he just took it as a joke. He didn't take Stone seriously. Look, compare that to the fact that in order to help his wife in her run for Senate in New York, Bill Clinton, before he left office, pardoned a dozen unrepentant Puerto Rican terrorists who had engaged in bombings, murders, armed robberies, and hadn't even asked for a pardon.
And then there was Roger Stone, convicted on cocaine charges, also gets a pardon, right?
Well, you're not talking about
not Roger Stone. Roger Clinton. Sorry, Roger Clinton. My mistake.
Yes, right. Or think about the fact that I think this president has done about a dozen commutations.
And about 25 pardons compared to what Obama between pardons and commutations, I think was at 1,900 is what Kayleigh McEnany said today. This is the thing that bothers me. In fact, the president could have pardoned Stone and just wiped it off his record. Right. But the president has offered up the opinion, I believe, or at least he said to believe, that he thinks Stone is innocent. If he pardoned him, there'd be nothing to appeal. But if he says, I'll give you a commutation, you don't have to go to prison, now continue with the appeals and be found not guilty of anything, which is a much cleaner result, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And again, just going back to Barack Obama for a minute, look, he put literally hundreds of drug dealers back on the street. And everybody applauded him saying, oh, this is such a good thing. And these are the same people criticizing this president. By the way, I started laughing when I saw that Nancy Pelosi said how angry she was about this and said that Congress was going to do something about this to limit the president's pardon power. That she just once again showed how profoundly ignorant she is of the Constitution. Congress can't limit the president's pardon power.
Well, the only thing they could do, tell me if I'm wrong about this, Hans, because I've reminded a few people of this, saying, well, that shouldn't be legal. I said, it's in the Constitution. You want to change it?
Right.
Go ahead. Get the Congress to pass the amendment that would be required to change it. Then get the 3/5 of the states to ratify it. Good luck with that. And maybe in a few decades you can get a change, and it won't be retroactive, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. But she was talking about passing some kind of legislation, which, of course, isn't going to work. And look, there's nothing unusual about this. Governors in, I think, almost every state have the ability to also issue pardons under the same kind of circumstances as the president. So the idea that there's something, there's some kind of misbehavior, that just isn't right either.
Well, and also, let me get into one other legal issue here, and that is, the entire Mueller investigation, as you said, is predicated on a set of lies. The Steele dossier was central to it. Then they took off from there, built this whole thing up kind of like a house of cards, built on nothing. And then they go to Stone and they say, we believe that you can tell us this. If you tell us this, we won't charge you, in effect. And if you won't tell us this, we're going to send you to prison. Now, the thing is, Hans, that troubles me about this is that I understand how law enforcement in legitimate circumstances will roll somebody over to get the bigger fish. You pick up a street-level drug dealer and you say, tell us who your supplier is and we'll give you lighter treatment. He names his supplier. You go to the supplier. You get him to roll over. And at some point, if you can roll it right up the chain, I don't think it happens all that often, but if you can roll all the way up the chain, you get to the person who's actually the big money person who's getting the most criminal benefit out of the crimes that are being committed, and you do it at a relatively low cost. But what happens? What safeguards against this kind of result where somebody who's been off on a 2-year mission, almost 2 years long, $40 million, dozens of lawyers, Mueller, to find something, and at the end, he's found next to nothing. I mean, yes, we got some Russians, but they were unconnected to Trump, and we got some people on tax evasion, things like that, but you're not getting what you want, and what you want is Roger Stone to tell you a certain set of facts, which only he can attest to, and if he'll tell you, you promise him either lighter treatment or no prosecution at all. How do you safeguard against that kind of thing being used to create something out of whole cloth that literally could take down a presidency?
Well, that's one of the biggest dangers of this kind of investigation and why you need highly ethical, highly professional prosecutors who won't do that. And remember, Bob Mueller's number 2 was a guy named Andrew Weissman, who without doubt is one of the most notoriously unethical prosecutors ever to be in the U.S. Justice Department. He's the guy that put literally tens of thousands of people out of work by bringing down Arthur Anderson, by making up charges which appeals court basically eventually said there was nothing to those cases. There was no violation of the law. And yet by then, of course, it was too late.
Yeah, the destruction. I remember when that came down because I was a reporter at the time. And I remember thinking the local Arthur Anderson just imploded. Because it basically took the entire company apart. And so you have all these people who go through all this, this incredibly tough time for absolutely no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, and Weissman, the number 2 in the Mueller investigation, he was the guy behind that. And by the way, there were substantiated accusations in that case when witnesses came forward with exculpatory evidence to clear the defendants he had charged, who were executives of Arthur Anderson. He threatened to prosecute them if they came forward with that evidence. That shows you just how bad Andrew Weissman is.
Yeah, and the safeguard, again, it doesn't appear there are safeguards built in. We just kind of assume that everybody is going to act out of good faith and with all the best motives, right? And if they don't, there's not much in the way of consequence, is there?
No, and unfortunately, too many bar associations aren't willing to clean up these kind of situations. Weissman being one of the examples, the New York bar refused to do anything about it. Why? Because he's a liberal and he's very well connected politically, and so they didn't want to take any action against it. Unbelievable.
Hans, it's a pleasure to have you on. Thanks very much. And don't go register your cat to vote, because we're going to have to talk about cats voting. You know that one. All these people telling me there's no fraud, but there is a cat registered to vote. That's Hans von Spakovsky, Senior Legal Fellow at the Heritage Foundation.